you should find list group. So this is a list group component in Bootstrap. To create a list like this, we need to use this markup. So we need a UL with this class and a bunch of list items with these classes. So we go to the docs, and on the left side, under component section, you should find list. So return this markup. Now here we get a bunch of errors because class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript or TypeScript. So here we need to rename all these classes to class name. Now let me show you another shortcut. Let's revert this back and D. So with the and again. So now we have, and with this we select, press Command and D. If you're on Windows, press Control and D. And with this we select the next occurrence of the selected keyword. So now we have multiple cursors. We can press Command and D one more time, and again, and again, and again. Now all of these are selected. So we delete them and type class name. Then we press Escape a couple of times to disable multi-cursor editing. Okay? Now Escape a couple of times, changes. On the Mac, it's Shift, Command, and P. And here we search for format document. Okay, here we have an error saying there are multiple formatters for TypeScript JSX files. So let's click on Configure. And here we're going to use Prettier as our default code formatter. Good. Now this file is formatted. Beautiful. Just note that Prettier automatically wrapped our JSX markup in parentheses. This is necessary to break the markup into multiple lines. So if you're not using VS Code with Prettier, be sure to add the left bracket in front of the return keyword so you can spread your JSX into multiple lines. So now back to the browser. Here's our list group component. But this is pretty boring. This doesn't have any functionality, and it doesn't allow us to render or display these items dynamically. So we're going to solve these issues one by one over the next few lessons. Well, if we add another element here, like an H1, we get a bunch of errors because in React, a component cannot return more than one element. So earlier I told you that this H1 expression that we have here eventually gets compiled to JavaScript. So this line gets translated to something like react.createElement with H1 being the type of the element. The same thing will happen for the second element. So in this function, we are returning multiple elements, and this is not allowed in React. Now, to solve this problem, we have a couple of different ways. One simple way is to wrap this entire expression inside a div or another element. So let me show you another shortcut. We select all this code, then we bring up the command palette. So we go to the view menu and bring up the command palette, or better, we use the shortcut. And here we search for wrap with abbreviation. Now we press enter, and here we specify the type of element that we want to use to wrap this entire code. So div. Enter. Done. Okay, so that's one way, but we're adding one extra element in the DOM purely for making React happy. This is unnecessary. A better way is to use a fragment. So on the top, we import fragment from React. Make sure to put it in braces. Now we replace the div with a fragment. So just like before, I've selected the div element. Now we can press Command and D to select the other div. And now with multiple cursors, we can edit both of them in one go. Okay. Now with this change, when this component is rendered on the screen, we're not going to have an additional element like a div in the DOM. Okay. Now there is even a better way to achieve the same result. We have a shorter syntax. We don't have to import the fragment component from React. So let's delete this line. And we select the fragment tags, both of them, and remove them. So if we add empty angle brackets, we're telling React to use a fragment to wrap all these children. Now back to the browser. So here's our heading and our items. Beautiful. Now, this list is kind of useless because we have hard-coded these items in our markup. What if we want to render a list of items dynamically? Well, let's declare a constant called items and set it to an array of strings. Here we can use the name of cities like New York, San Francisco, Tokyo, London, and Paris. Now, in JSX, we don't have a for loop, so we cannot write code like for item in items rendered whatever. It doesn't work that way. So we have to use a different technique. In JavaScript, as you probably know, arrays have a method called map for mapping or converting each item to an item of a different type. So if we type items.map, here we can pass an arrow function. We can say take each item and convert it to an item of a different type. So here we want to convert each item to an li element. So here we type li, and inside the tags, we want to render or display the item itself. Earlier, I told you that in JSX, we use curly braces to render data dynamically. So here we render the item itself. Okay. Now we're going to delete all these list items, and instead we're going to bring down this piece of code. However, we get a compilation error because this expression is not allowed in the middle of a JSX markup. In JSX, we can only use HTML elements or other React components. So to render data dynamically, we need to wrap this expression in braces. Okay? Now, save the changes. Our code got reformatted, so Prettier plugin broke down our code into multiple lines and added parentheses to wrap them. Now, back to the browser. Here's our list of cities. Beautiful. While reviewing this video, I just realized that I made a mistake earlier and forgot to apply a CSS class to our list items. That's why we have lost styling here. But don't worry, I'll fix that in this video. I just realized our code into multiple lines and added parentheses to wrap them. Now, back to the browser components. This and inside the tags, we want to render or display the item itself. Earlier, I told you that in JSX, we use curly braces to render data dynamically. So here we render the item itself, okay? Now, we're going to delete all these list items, and instead, we're going to bring down this piece of code. However, we get a compilation error because this expression is not allowed in the middle of a JSX markup. In JSX, we can only use HTML elements or other React components. So to render data dynamically, we need to wrap this expression in braces. Okay? Now save the changes. Our code got reformatted, so Prettier plugin broke down our code into multiple lines and added parentheses to wrap them. Now, back to the browser. Here's our list of cities. Beautiful. While reviewing this video, I just realized that I made a mistake earlier and forgot to apply a CSS class to our list items. That's why we have lost styling here. But don't worry, I'll fix that in a later video. However, if we right-click anywhere on this page and go to Inspect, this is Chrome Developer Tools. You should probably be familiar with it. Here on the Console tab, we have a warning saying each child in a list should have a unique key prop. What does this mean? Well, back to our code. This is where we are mapping each item to a list item. Here, the warning is saying that each list item should have a key prop or a key property that uniquely identifies that item. React needs this to keep track of our items. So later, when we add or remove items dynamically, React knows what part of the page should be updated. So when rendering a list of items using the map method, we should give each item a unique key. Now in this case, each item is a unique string, so we can use the item itself as a unique key. But in a real world application where we retrieve items from an API, quite often each item has a property like ID. We don't have that in this case, so we don't have to worry about it. Now back to the browser. Let's refresh. The warning is gone, and here's our list. Beautiful. Okay, so we don't have to worry about it. Now back to the browser. Let's refresh. The warning is gone, and here's our list. Beautiful. Beautiful. Make sure this works, I'm going to change. So here we can return a completely different markup. For example, we can add a paragraph, and here we say no item found. Now to make sure this works, I'm going to change the constant to a variable so we can reassign this on the next line. Okay, now back in the browser. So here we have no item found. Beautiful. But okay, now back in the browser, reassign this on the next line. Okay, now back in the browser. So here we have no item found. Beautiful. But our heading is gone. So we can come back here and add our heading as well. List. And now we need to wrap this entire expression inside a fragment. So let's add a fragment. Okay, now if I save the changes, Prettier reformats our code, and here, once again, we have parentheses for spreading this code over multiple lines. With this, our heading is back, but I don't like this implementation because we have a bit of duplication. And generally speaking, duplication in code is not considered a good practice. So let me show you a different way to achieve the same result. We're going to get rid of the if statement. Instead, we're going to render things conditionally inside our JSX expression. However, inside this JSX expression, we cannot write an if statement because, as I told you earlier, here we can only use HTML elements or other React components. The only exception is braces. With braces, we can render anything dynamically. So here we can use the ternary operator in JavaScript. So we start with our condition, items.length equals 0. Then we type a question mark. If this condition is true, we're going to return a paragraph with this message. Otherwise, we're going to return null, meaning nothing will be rendered. With this, we have the same result as before, and our implementation is a little bit more concise. Now, sometimes this logic can get a little bit too complicated and it can pollute our JSX markup. In those cases, we can always extract this logic and store it in a separate variable or constant. For example, here we can declare a constant called message. Now we move this expression right here. And then we can simply render our message constant in our JSX markup. So now our JSX markup is a little bit cleaner. Now we can also move this logic inside a function. For example, we can declare a function called getMessage. And here I'm using the arrow function syntax. Now we can move this logic For example, we can declare a function called getMessage. And here I'm using the arrow function syntax. Now we can move this logic right here. And now we don't need this constant anymore. So here we have a function and we can call that function to get the right message. Now, the benefit of using a function in this case is that our functions can have parameters. So perhaps we can get different messages depending on different conditions. So here we can pass different arguments like 1 or whatever and get a different message. If you don't have that scenario, it's better to use a constant in this case. Now, let me revert this code back to the previous state. I'm going to move this expression right here so I can show you a more concise way to write the same code. So let's remove this function. Okay, look, this piece of code is fine and it works, but the part that bugs me a little bit is the second part, returning null here. Let me show you a better way to write this code. We start with our true implement, but how does this? We don't have the null element. We'll return to a logical AND between this condition and the value that we want to return if this condition is true. That is the paragraph element. Okay? With this implementation, we don't have the null keyword and our code is a little bit more concise. But how does this work? Well, let's go back to the browser and open up Chrome Developer Tools. Here in the console tab, this is going to be our JavaScript AND with another value like 1. See what happened? the result of this entire expression is equal to the second value. What if we type true and mosh? The result of the expression is mosh. Now, what if you have false? That means if our content is will be content in a component. First, I'm going to remove this line. So we bring back our items. Good. Now, I just realized that earlier I made a mistake and forgot to apply one of the Bootstrap classes to these items. So back to our code. This is where we're rendering a list item. We should give this a class of list-group-item. Okay, that's better. Now we want to be able to click on each item and see it on the console. In React, each element has a property or a prop called onClick. So here we set onClick to braces. Now inside the braces, we can write an arrow function. So a function with no parameters. And here we can just say console.log clicked. As simple as that. Now I'm going to save the changes. So the code is reformatted. So now each property or each prop is on a separate line. Okay. Now back to the browser. We had an internal server error from this web server. Don't worry about it. Just refresh. The error is gone. Now, if the code is